People who watch security cameras for a living, what creepy things have you tried to forget? I used to do IT support for a charity that supplied housing and support for homeless people. A large portion also had mental health issues, so there were a fair amount of interesting events that happened. Being in IT, I avoided experiencing most of it firsthand, though I was threatened with being stabbed on about my third day. Anyway, I come in one Monday, and there's an email labeled urgent, saying there was an incident at the stairwell of one of the properties on Sunday night, and could I pull the relevant CCTV footage, put it on a DVD. I had to do this fairly frequently. I skip through the footage, find the incident, usually a fight or blatant drug dealing, and burn it to DVD for the police. The email never mentioned what the incident was, so I skip through the footage and watch as a clearly very agitated man ties a rope around a stair rail at the top of the stairs. Then his neck looks over the rail and then just casually tips forward over it. The rope flipped him round and he dangled there twitching for far too long before he just stopped. So yeah, that was a fun Monday. Wasn't a security officer, but I worked at a 24/7 gas station for a while. One night my coworker accidentally killed himself while at work, and I made the mistake of watching the footage. He went to the back of the store with a bag of drugs, probably cocaine, snorted it, and started acting funny for about 10 minutes. He then sits in the back office and gets fidgety/thrashing around until finally he just goes limp in the chair. He had died of a heart attack and sat there for 5 hours before anybody came in. Thought the absence of an employee was strange and called the cops. It was really weird seeing people come in and act all pissy for the lack of service. They'd just leave thinking someone was lazy, but nah, dude was dead. I used to work loss prevention for a big box store. We had a lady get arrested for public indecency, and I was asked to investigate. I had to follow her backwards from the point of arrest, and it was a trip, to say the least. She arrived at the store, swerving and nearly hitting several cars. She entered the store with 2 young children, both of whom are mentally handicapped. That lady literally dragged those kids around the store, slapping them and tugging at their ears/collars if they didn't obey. At some point, she just abandons them in the clothing section, walks through the back doors to the break area, and I'm assuming she thought it was the bathroom because she proceeds to pull down her pants and shits all over the fire exit door. She pulls her pants up, without wiping mind you, and goes back to the floor like nothing happened. Someone saw what she did and followed her. Luckily, there's an officer in the store at the time and quickly approaches her when the associate tells him what she did. Needless to say, she was definitely high and/or drunk and was arrested. The scary part is, she did not mention those kids, not one time. It wasn't until I reviewed the tape that I saw they were just waiting by the shopping cart, completely oblivious and afraid to move. Child services were later called, and I still think about those kids often. Breaks my heart to think about the bullshit those kids must still be going through. Not a job, but my significant other and I have the Owlet monitor for our infant looking at his crib and room. It's set up like a CCTV, and it's creepy to begin with. I wake up at 2 a.m., and I go check on him, and I go back to bed. Once in bed, I get on my phone to view the monitor just for reassurance, and I see 2 light dots like eyes in night vision in the window of his room. I first shit my pants, and I go in the room to check everything out. I can't see anything outside, so I turn on the monitor again and don't see the dots anymore. So I think it could be a dog or something. I go back to the bed and wake up again an hour later to check the monitor, and the dots are fucking there again. So I grab my pistol and I go outside around his room and check the spot by the window, really ready to have to pull the trigger. Adrenaline is on full blast. I don't find or see anything, but the monkey grass has been mashed down by the window like something sat there for a while. I set up a sleeping bag in my son's room after that for a couple of nights, and I checked the monitor so I could see what the night vision caught, but I never saw those lights again. I'm super thankful it was just that, but I was scared. Edit. I'm usually skeptical about stuff like this. I considered lights and stuff, and I hope it was an animal, not a person. Fucking messed up person. But my son is now 6 months. This happened when he was 4 months old, and the camera has been there since we brought him home. The whole time it's been up, I've never seen that, and I don't live by traffic lights, and no street lamp is on that side of the house. I seriously almost lost bladder control when I saw them again, same spot just an hour later, but when I went in his room and looked at my phone, I just saw me and him and the black window. It freaked me out so much, I prepared to defend my family, but he's 6 months now and I've never seen it again, so hopefully, an animal. I reviewed the security cameras around my office building. The cameras only monitor the outside of the building. We have signs posted everywhere stating cameras are watching. You get accustomed to certain movement patterns and activation of cameras, so I don't have to review the whole day's activity, just the parts that show things out of the ordinary. For a while, homeless people were using an area behind landscaping to kick back and smoke drugs. Marijuana, heroin off foil, glass meth pipes, you name it. It's all in full view of one of the cameras. Watched a few drug sales there too. However, the most disturbing was by far the sex. Basically, guys would take the homeless women to that area and do any number of weird and wonderful things. The weirdest of all was when some dude lay on the ground and a drug-slinging / homeless woman sat on a bench looking at her phone. He slipped off her flip-flop and started sucking off her toes. He took short breaks intermittently to hit a glass meth pipe, then went back to work on those toes. This went on for about 45 minutes, then they left. We systematically found almost all the homeless porn stars during the day and told them our place has cameras and not to come back. Things have been quiet for a few years now. I had a job reviewing hidden tape footage, looking for people sabotaging food product in a factory. The entire idea was creepy on one level. They made pasta. They were finding things like glass, screws, staples and shit in the product. Thankfully, none of it made it out of the plant. They had metal detectors at the end of the line, because it's common for things like metal shavings to get in the product given the machines, so they want to catch that and stop the product. But machines went off, and they'd inspect the product to find ridiculous shit that there is no way could have made it in there unless someone put it in there. That's creepy because think about how possibly terrible it would be to have that product make it to the public. You aren't paying attention. You throw your shells in a pot, boil them along with a nail, then feed that shit to your kids who just chomp down. Thank God for fail-safes. Anyway, they need to catch whoever is doing it. They install the cameras in the areas where most of the affected product is made and packaged. They record it all. Then they hire me to go through the tapes on high speed, looking for alarms going off of the machines or anything weird. So I see a ton of stuff that's notable. Some of it funny, some of it cruel, but most of it just plain terrible. Eventually, I do figure out who the saboteur was. But the creepiest thing was the guy driving a forklift around with his kid, not only on the forklift with him, but hanging out of the sides waving at people. It's creepy because at some point not long after that, the guy killed his kid somehow in a forklift accident. Thank fuck the accident wasn't on tape, or at least my tapes. Kid never should have been allowed even in the plant, certainly not on the fucking forklift. And this guy killed his kid. So it was like I was watching a ghost, and I kept wishing I'd had those tapes to review a week or whatever earlier, because as soon as I would have said something, they would have disciplined the dude and maybe saved the kid's life. I was working at a very small bank, so as the IT person, I also had the security cameras all showing on a monitor by my desk, since I had the ability to save videos and burn them to DVD if necessary. One day, I get a call downstairs to help with unlocking accounts / resetting passwords. I go downstairs, and the employee had 2 people at her desk, an elderly lady and her daughter. The elderly lady's husband had passed suddenly, and he always dealt with financial things, so she had no clue. She was always sickly, and he was always a pillar of health, so they never bothered teaching her these things. So we reset her passwords, and I sat with them for about an hour, teaching her how to use basic online banking and showing the daughter so they can work things out on their own. They were so sweet. It was really sad, but they were very grateful, and when they left, the older woman seems much less intimidated and a little more confident in moving on without her husband. A few days later, I found out they were both brutally murdered. The daughter's estranged husband stabbed and shot them both to death, then jumped from a local bridge to his own death. It was stunning, and I immediately sat at my desk and pulled up the video, watching myself have a friendly session with them, talking, calmly sitting there chatting, letting them tell me stories of her husband some crying and some laughing. All the while, I'm silently screaming at the monitor, telling myself to warn them, say something, do something. But of course, I can't. This was days old, and I am just as helpless now as I was then when I didn't know. Watched a female employee, in the span of maybe a minute, pick her nose, itch her front junk like a champ, then reverse things up and go whole hand down her crack, scratching. Large lady. Then she pulled up the hand to her face and sniffed. Then, inexplicably, she licked the pointer finger. I've seen all manner of weird shit, and that one sticks with me. Seen people piss, shit, whatever in the open, or in fitting rooms, or people getting it on in the fitting rooms. Watched several dudes punching the Purple Crown. Always weird to confront them. Had to apprehend one for spunking on a rack of FUBU. Worst of the pervs are usually following young girls around, snapping photos, thinking no one sees them. And yes, I mean underage. Sometimes horribly underage girls. Coworker of mine had to have a guy arrested who was jacking it in the children's section while watching children nearby. I was happy I wasn't there for that. I'm not violent, and I'm about 100% certain I wouldn't have done anything more than call the police like she did. It's more the frustration that you want to slap the shit out of someone and you know you can't do it. People will do crazy shit when they don't think they're being watched. Not necessarily creepy, but I work on security for a popular UK supermarket and came into work one day to find a note asking me to burn an incident off the cameras onto disk. It was something from the car park the previous night, so I figured we'd had a shoplifter or an incident or an accident in the car park, but no, it wasn't anything as pleasant as that. We had a situation where a couple, older white gentleman and youngish Asian female, had been in store, and the night security guy just thought they were acting a bit funny. So he follows them around the store on CCTV in store to see if anything went on. Nothing really happens during this time, though the guy seems to become more and more aggravated. They go outside, having purchased their shopping, to pack it into the car boot, when a clear argument occurs between them. He suddenly turns round, kicks the empty trolley across the car park, and then smacks her full force in the face out of seemingly nowhere. She recoils in pain. A bit more shouting takes place, but she seems to dutifully take her seat in the passenger seat, despite what took place. During the process of burning this disc for the police, since our security guy had called it in as an assault, I had to rewatch the moment where he hits her over and over again, but watch helplessly as she seems to calmly get into the car of the man who had just assaulted her. Long story short, she was a mail-order bride who was trafficked here, and as well as assault, he got done for people trafficking, so a pretty wholesome ending to an otherwise awful story. Years ago, I worked overnight at a homeless shelter for men. A good portion of the regular guys that stayed there had mental health and/or drug problems. There were a lot of fights and the occasional stabbing, but for the most part, everyone was relatively well-behaved and most were good people at heart. I received a lot of threats, but no one ever acted on them. One night, when I arrived from my shift, I noticed there was a much larger police presence than usual. I walked into our office, and the officer in charge started asking me if I noticed a guy, Richard, behaving unusually at all lately. I had not seen anything out of the ordinary, and I told him such. I looked at the dorm list and noted that he was marked as no longer staying at the shelter. He was a long-term resident, so I thought this was odd. The police left without telling me anything, except the fact they needed security footage from 2 specific cameras from the night before. I did not work the night before, and the guy I normally work with pulled a no-show. We were the only 2 people besides the manager, who was on a holiday, that were trained on how to burn footage to a DVD. I spent the rest of my shift in shock. When I found the footage they were looking for, I felt physically ill. Richard had gone out onto the second-floor smoking deck, finished a cigarette, got up on the railing, and dove headfirst onto the cement below. The first camera on the second floor showed him jump, but the second camera on the first floor was much more gruesome. He landed headfirst and rolled over in a way that he was just staring right into the camera as he lay there dying. I quickly put the footage on DVD and went to throw up. I was given the next day off, no counseling, no nothing. I will never forget that one. He was a pretty good dude as far as I knew. some mental health issues, but no one knew he was suicidal or why he did it. Worked on a campus, watching cameras, was doing my hourly check at around 1 a.m. while talking to my buddy who was on the duty guard. While flipping through the cameras, I passed by one of our entrances and saw some guy standing at the door just staring in. I spotted it and flipped back to said camera, and my buddy and I just stopped talking and looked at each other because he was gone. I switched to the next camera, which was the exterior camera, and he was not anywhere to be seen. I asked my buddy if he wanted to go check it out. He said, hell no. We checked the footage to see if what we saw was right, and sure enough, he was there, but we could never find him on any other camera at that time. The university I work for was reportedly haunted, but I don't exactly believe in ghosts. I still don't believe it was one, but it was still creepy as hell, and I can't explain what exactly happened. I have other stories from patrols with guards at night, but that's my freakish night on camera. I am a correctional officer on the night shift, so my job involves a lot of watching cameras and performing cell checks. One night, I'm sitting in my office around 0300, and some movement on the CCTV catches my eye. I look up and there's this big dude walking through my jail, looking like he was on a mission. The only way into the jail is through the booking room right next to my office, and I was 100% sure nobody had walked past me. So my mind starts racing. Did I leave a cell door unlocked? Has a violent inmate escaped? Our cameras are old, and the halls are dark at night, so I couldn't see many details of the guy, just that he seemed to be scoping all the other inmates out as he made his way through the cell block. As I'm trying to process all this, I see him suddenly stop and change direction, starting beelining straight to my office. With no time to do anything else, I jump up and run over to the door and get ready for the fight. I waited for what felt like an eternity for this guy to bust my door in with a full-on adrenaline rush, but he never showed up. I glanced back at the cameras and he was gone, disappeared into the ether. After scratching my head for a minute, I went to review the footage. That's when I realized that there was a glitch in our camera's playback that had caused a half-hour delay, and the guy in the video was just me doing a cell check and heading back to my own office. Never been more relieved in my life.